Hello, everyone. It has again been a while since I've talked on here. Today is kind of a two-part discussion. For those of you who don't know, I'm Dr. Megan Miller, and I want to talk about observations relating to our field and how the response has been to the proposed resolution for the National Council for Independent Living. I also want to share how this response has created a motivation for me to have more action on my end. So I will share the questions I plan to ask our professional organizations and myself relating to this topic. I've been a member of ABAI for 15 years and other professional organizations in our field, but I'm focusing on ABAI because that's how I was informed of the resolution for the National Council. And I think a lot of people discovered that this resolution existed based off of that. I attended the first autism conference they hosted back in the early 2000s. I've attended the annual conference every year since joining, except for one. I've presented at the conference, I'm pretty sure, every year for the past 11 years, except for one. I've served on two different work groups, one relating to billing codes and one relating to social media. I've served as chair and in other positions for Disseminating Behavior Analysis Special Interest Group. And I also helped contribute to the early development of the ethics SIG and military and behavior analysis SIG. I say all this to show that ABAI is an organization that I value and support. It has been integral in shaping who I am in the field, and I've learned so much based on attending events hosted by this organization. Over the past few years, it has become more apparent to me that there are aspects of how ABAI and other professional organizations operate that I haven't really preferred. However, the email I received last Friday was the first time I was truly disappointed and questioned my membership with this organization. Throughout this video, I will explain more about why I had that reaction. Some of my colleagues in the field know that advocacy is an important component of my life. Over my career as a behavior analyst, I have engaged in advocacy efforts relating to obtaining funding for students to attend that first ABAI autism conference, saving the ABA program at FSU Panama City, passing insurance regulations in Virginia, passing licensure laws in Virginia, and correcting aspects of proposed changes to TRICARE ABA service delivery, creating a nonprofit that advocated on behalf of behavior analysts, and I contributed to efforts relating to organizing action around Medicaid changes in Florida. During this time, I've always operated from a grassroots space. I've said things that had to be said, even if people didn't like it. And I've often been one of the few behavior analysts involved in the efforts. I'm not sharing this to brag on myself. I'm sharing this so those who may not know me as well or be aware of these activities in my life understand this is not something new for me, that I'm not trying to be part of a trend. This is a genuine part of who I am, and it has existed in my behavior analytic life since I was a graduate student in 2005. Never in a million years did I think my advocacy efforts would take me to putting my neck out on the line to encourage other behavior analysts to change how they are engaging the disability community. But here we are. The first thing that came up for me as I analyzed what is going on for this recent response to the news that the National Council on Independent Living is voting on a resolution relating to banning applied behavior analysis was the differences that exist for this situation compared to previous advocacy efforts. The bulk of my energy relating to advocacy has been around either informing legislators about what we do or insurance companies. In those situations, the people truly did not have a clue about behavior analysis. A lot of education needed to be provided. And oftentimes it felt like certain people, whether it was the government or insurance companies, were our enemies. Their interests and their values were in opposition to what we were doing as behavior analysts. Legislators didn't want more regulation or to do things that could cost the government or taxpayers money. Insurance companies are highly motivated to save money. The response to NCIL's resolution seemed pretty similar to the responses and calls for action I've seen around insurance mandates and funding. This ain't that though. This isn't the same thing. NCIL is not our enemy. NCIL does not have different values and interests than behavior analysts. NCIL is a group we should not be working against. We should be working with them. From NCIL's website, the mission: NCIL advances independent living and the rights of people with disabilities. Vision: NCIL envisions a world in which people with disabilities are valued equally and participate fully. The National Council on Independent Living is the longest running cross-disability grassroots organization run by and for people with disabilities. Founded in 1982, it's the same age as me, NCIL represents thousands of organizations and individuals, including individuals with disability, centers for independent living, statewide independent living councils, and other organizations that advocate for human and civil rights of people with disabilities throughout the United States. For more information, you can visit their website, and I'll link that. I don't understand. You all just heard what I just read. Like, this is not the same thing. This is not an insurance company. These are not legislators. These are people that we should be closely aligned with. And all of us would read that mission and vision and say, yes, right in there with you. I am here for it. Yet that's not the response I saw over the past week. It is unfortunate and fear-inducing that our field primarily serves disability, and the largest and oldest disability advocacy organization is considering passing a resolution to ban ABA? Yes, of course it is. These folks aren't legislators who know nothing about disability or intervention. These folks aren't insurance companies trying to avoid paying for a costly therapy. Approaching how we respond to something like this needs to look different. These are folks we should be learning from. Why are they concerned about ABA, and how can we do better? They are not our enemy. Responding defensively and with strongly worded letters to tell them why they are wrong and what they got wrong in the resolution is not how to move forward from this. Let's also keep in mind that a lot of behavior analysts don't currently understand the roots of our field. If our own certificates can't properly explain the science, how are we going to go in on a group outside of our field for not having every statement accurately stated? Let's not lose sight of the forest for the trees. Having a few pieces within the resolution that we could explain differently and say why they're misconceptions does not take away from the overall concerns being presented by NCIL. What does it accomplish to hone in on, well, they didn't even get X, Y, or Z right, while failing to address the actual concerns? I'm going to say something here, may not sit well with folks, but it needs to be said. One of the criticisms I've seen is a resolution states that Lovaas created ABA. First of all, pull our certificates and you will likely find at least some percent that were taught this in graduate school that also would agree with that statement. Of course, many of us know that this is not an accurate statement. However, it may not be as inaccurate as we make it out to be. Behavior analysis in the way society knows it today, in the mainstream insurance-funded application, in the references we cite to get funding, is based on Lovaas's work. The application of behavior analysis and the way NCIL has seen it happening and that they are concerned about was because of Lovaas's work. Have y'all read the Chance interview with Lovaas from 1974? I'll link that in the chat as well, where Lovaas brags about building humans and hitting a learner so hard she knew he could kill her. If you haven't, you should, so you understand our history. And also because these folks have. And this is where they are coming from. We do a disservice to ourselves and the viability of our field by not only failing to read and know about these things, but also by only taking the good bits and acting like that's all that matters. The time has come to acknowledge all of it and work together to move forward. The outcomes don't erase how we got there. And many times the outcomes that we laud aren't the outcomes sought by the community that we're trying to serve. And we need to understand that. We know social validity is like supposed to be the main thing we're operating off of, yet we continue to push aside these communities that are trying to educate us on how we could do things differently. I did a live already on this, but how can we operate from a place of safety and humanity for our clients if we don't even know the history? If we can't identify the things that are influenced by that history, if we can't use that to question what we are doing and change it, and I'll link that live in the chat as well. I was so impressed in May 2020 when Dr. Erin Rasmussen, the president of ABAI at that time, gave her presidential address, focused on compassion and behavior analysis. The other main thing that jumped out at me in the responses I've seen is that they've been highly lacking when it comes to the points made in this presentation. Dr. Rasmussen said, it's not quote necessarily, these are from my notes, but this is approximately what she said. Compassionate behaviorism is a philosophy of science that allows the values of science to be practiced, but it includes the behaviors of humility, perspective taking and empathy, behavioral psychological flexibility, and inclusion. Where are these things in the response to NCIL, especially the perspective taking and empathy? Going after a disability advocacy group instead of understanding their concerns does not demonstrate empathy or perspective taking. As much as I love this presentation, and I'll share my notes that I took here, I made a note of this when Dr. Rasmussen talked about inclusion. She said, again, approximately, these are from my notes, who do we include in our verbal communities and who are we excluding? People outside of behavior analysis? Are we talking to people outside of our field? If so, are we being open and kind, or are we being defensive and dismissive? And then she gave some examples, applied versus the lab, looking at genders, ethnicity, LGBTQ. Notice anything missing? I've noticed this thing missing in a lot of talks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where is disability? Again, our field primarily serves disability. And even when we're talking about diversity and equity and inclusion, it's missing. It doesn't even come up as part of the conversation. Yet here we are shocked that a disability advocacy rights group doesn't like ABA. When this presentation happened, some question, how does a helping profession need to have a presidential address focusing on compassion? I encourage you to check out the notes and reflect on if you are witnessing compassionate science in our field and if you're a model of it as well. When certain things that I'll list below in a second exist in our field, how can we expect disability advocacy organizations to support behavior analysis? When many people in our field still rely heavily on extinction, despite the lack of research, as a first step in addressing challenging behavior, putting hands on learners to get them to comply, and ignoring them in moments of crisis. When people are called soft, or criticized for refusing to use extinction. When advancements made in functional analysis technologies that create safer and more humane processes and interventions are met with researchers who try to prove it wrong and operate from an ego space instead of applauding the improvement in our practice. When numerous conferences and presentations are hosted within our field over the last year, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the list of marginalized groups that are discussed consistently doesn't include disability. When our ethics code is just now being updated to include assent, and it still isn't as thorough as it could be. When I ask a question at a conference to an expert in our field that was presenting on functional assessment, and that's their area of expertise, about obtaining consent of the learners involved in the assessment and treatment process, and the answer revolves around the parents' consent. And even when pushed to learn more about what the procedures were for the actual human subjected to the procedures, I am told, oh, we don't have a way to do that. When disability rights groups, autistic self-advocates, and their allies are met with criticisms, constantly corrected on how they are wrong and made out to be the enemy instead of listened to, heard, and included. When Judge Rottenberg Center fights an FDA ban to continue to shock learners under their care, while admitting in court documents that they don't use functional assessment consistently. And we have no idea what measures they have in place to incorporate the advancements that have been made over the last 5 years relating to functional analysis, such as PFA and SBT. When leadership in our field and our primary professional organization not only doesn't speak out against JRC practices, but regularly defends them without learning more deeply about the concerns. If you haven't seen it, there's a hashtag trending, Stop the Shock. And it's consistently being tied to behavior analysis because JRC is run by behavior analysts. And that might be some people's first exposure to behavior analysis, that we shock people. We know that's, one place, but that's their first exposure. And that's their understanding of what we do. When all of these things are happening and more, how is it even possible that we would be surprised and defensive when a disability rights organization is against behavior analysis? Over the past year, we have seen a rise in efforts focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you are like me, you realized after George Floyd's murder, that even though you were informed of the discrepancies that existed around race and education, that even though you were moved and appalled by the racial inequities that existed in our society, you were actually part of the problem. You actually didn't know what the lived experience of your Black friends and colleagues was. And you had a lot of learning and discomfort to experience and continue experiencing to work to dismantle those systems. I hope you will reflect for a moment if you have put that same work in to recognizing ableism and understanding the role we play as behavior analysts in supporting ableist systems and creating ableist interventions that do not honor each unique human as the person they are. Have you sat with the discomfort that the science you've always been proud of, the field you've always fought tooth and nail for, has and is causing harm to folks that you may only understand it at a basic level? Have you taken the same amount of time to attend trainings and presentations by experts in disability justice and disability advocates as you have by experts in social justice and anti-racism so that you can further understand the issues and improve your practice? Or have you operated from a space of defensiveness? It is natural to fear that these types of resolutions could destroy the very necessary interventions that many folks in our world need in their lives. It is much more likely that the ego-based reaction to these resolutions and our failure to understand these issues is what will destroy our field. We had a chance here to show NCIL we can do better, and we lost it. See the post I'm going to link from the president of NCIL, where she shares what she has experienced over the last week from behavior analysts. You don't think these defensive reactions are creating more of an image problem for us? You don't think these defensive reactions are proving to groups that already don't support ABA why they don't support ABA? This is just one data point of many. Each time the overwhelming reaction is done in this way, it gives more evidence to the very folks we serve that we are not safe for them. It is time to grow. We all should be working side by side to obtain funding and better environments. The mission and vision of NCIL is aligned with behavior analysis. Let's grow the thing we love, as Mari Serta says, and demonstrate that behavior analysts create environments in which people with disabilities are, quote, valued equally and participate fully. Before I end this video, I want to share with everyone the action step I'm taking in contacting our professional organization. It's time to put my money where my mouth is. If I don't understand how these organizations are planning to address these issues and how my professional values align with theirs, I shouldn't be giving them my support. Additionally, I also need to make sure I fully understand how I'm addressing these things for myself and in my own practice. I hope these questions facilitate your own discovery process and engagement with other professional organizations. Question 1, what efforts have you taken to fully understand the anti-ABA sentiment and determine how to work with those that criticize our field to address these criticisms? In addition to that, what attempts have you made to connect with disability rights organizations and other entities that have anti-ABA criticisms to proactively develop a relationship with them and determine how to work together? Is the organization planning a task force relating to addressing anti-ABA sentiment? If so, how will this task force be formed? Will it include consumers and disability rights advocates? Will it seek to include those who criticize our field so we can address the criticisms? And when I say address the criticisms, I might have to edit this question a little bit. I don't mean be defensive against them. I mean, how do we take that information and change what we're doing? How familiar is the organization with resources within this document? And I will link the Google document that we've created that has a lot of different resources relating to uplifting and listening to neurodiversity advocates, and they're just different webinars and podcasts and things like that. Where does your organization stand in supporting these efforts? Has the organization created, question 4, has the organization created a stance relating to the use of shock at JRC? If so, was that stance created based on evaluating the court documents from the FDA ban? Is the stance informed by understanding whether or not JRC is incorporating advancements that have been made in behavior analysis, trauma-informed care, neuroscience, and other related disciplines? Has the organization explored the possibility that how our field has been interacting with criticisms is the bigger threat and is contraindicated relating to social validity? In Dr. Rasmussen's question 6, in Dr. Rasmussen's presidential address for ABAI in 2020, she provided an in-depth analysis of how science can engage compassionately. How does the organization incorporate the points Dr. Rasmussen made in her address? If you're not familiar with this presentation, please see notes here to learn more about the points she made. I may develop additional questions regarding inclusion and efforts to increase accessibility. However, for now, I'm focusing more on understanding how the organizations are operating, broadly speaking, and responding to criticisms of our field. So that's what I had to talk about for today. I'm interested to see what thoughts people have, and I hope it's not too late. I hope we can work together to be collaborative with the various entities that serve disabilities in our communities and not be defensive against them. Thanks, everyone.